everyone, and welcome to the Broken Worship Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Mitchell. Today, I'm excited to have my good friend and host of the Worth Living For podcast, Shaun Redfern. Good talking to you, Shaun. It's been too long.
Way too long.
How are you doing, man?
Yeah, good man. Just slowly recovering. Hopefully going back to work the first week of November, but we'll see how my appointment goes on the 29th of this month.
Yeah,
So,
so to my listeners, so I don't you had a big thing going on with do you want if do you feel comfortable sharing about what happened?
yeah, that's okay. I was mowing my lawn and I took the catcher out, and when I was holding the lid that you lift up and then put the catcher in, I went to get some of the grass clippings on the corners, and obviously the mower was like full tilt. So my right hand got sucked in, and pretty much my right index finger got nicked a fair bit.
Wow.
So, but yeah, the wound went like slightly necrotic, and then I got transferred to a second hospital for another opinion, and yeah, they had to amputate. So, but thankfully, because the two fractures at the top they had healed, so they didn't take too much. So yeah,
Well, thank God it wasn't more serious than it was.
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess so I kind of have a interesting topic that I'm excited to dig into. But did you want to share anything like music related that anything like bands we should be listening to or any songs that you've been jamming lately?
Oh man, I haven't been on Instagram or Facebook in so long. Just just focusing on healing and stuff like that. But I noticed. I think it was Friday, maybe. Yeah, Friday. I think Haste Today finally released a new song after like nearly 10 years. Called Burn. Yeah, that's awesome.
What was it dope?
Yeah, it's the intro kind of reminded me of When Everything Falls, and I think people are gonna hate me if I get this wrong, but I think that song's from Burning Bridges when Jimmy Ryan was in the band. But yeah, man, it's cool. It's really cool. But
Awesome. Um, yeah, and then so last thing I wanted to ask. So do you with this being Halloween month, do you like watching horror movies at all, or is that not really your thing?
no, not so much anymore, man. I used to like growing up, but me and my wife kind of, yeah, not really.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. Um, well, yeah, let's dig into the topic. So I have been really interested in so if anyone that listens to my podcast knows I'm really big about the greatest commandment that Jesus gave. Love God with I summarize it, love God with all that we are and love our neighbor as ourselves. That's how you can read the whole thing if you want, but that's kind of how I summarize it. But I wanted to correlate and connect with the greatest commandment that Jesus spoke about in the New Testament and the 10 commandments of the Old Testament that's in Exodus. Um So I'm gonna read them, and then I'm going to kind of talk with you about it. So the Ten Commandments are um you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet. So, and I did research. I'm gonna just give a research credit to Harvest Church. I found like a sermon information from Harvest Church with their sermon called "Loving God: The First Four Commandments." So, with my research, it says so basically the first four commandments up to so from you shall not have no other gods up to the so you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not take the name of the Lord in vain. And you shall remember to take the Sabbath to keep it holy. Those four are connecting with how you should love God. And then the other six is how you should love your neighbor, honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You should not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. Can you speak on what what can you speak on that of your input on any of that?
Maybe the adultery part, because like if you're married or whatever, and you um I guess you could say disrespect or dishonor your wife, which is dishonoring your marriage, it's essentially breaking the vows that you made before friends, family, and God. And it's essentially more or less saying to yourself and other people, and especially your wife, that um, you don't take the relationship legitimately, or you don't really um, honor the relationship how you're supposed to, if that makes sense. But so far it's yeah.
Yeah. So something that so I when you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, when you act, you're naturally don't want to, I would say you don't want to put anything else above God. You wouldn't want to create idols or object in place of God. And
Mm,
so and you don't want to speak falsely or speak deceptively about God. And with the Sabbath, you would naturally want to, as in any relationship, you would want to spend time and take rest in God. So I think that kind of shows
mm,
loving God. That kind of shows the first four aspects of how that correlates, those commandments correlates with loving God. And then the last six, when you love your neighbor as yourself, you would want to show your father and mother respect and honor because they just made sacrifices bringing you into the world, nurturing for providing for you and teaching you wisdom and truth. um and then you if you want to love your neighbor as you love yourself, you wouldn't want someone to harm you, cheat on you, steal from you, lie to you or be jealous of you, or you wouldn't want to harm others as you wouldn't want anyone to harm you, or to the extreme of murder, or you
Mm,
wouldn't want someone to just cheat on you, so you shouldn't cheat on others, steal, lie, or covet. So I think so that kind of just spelling out that's kind of spelling out the commandments and how that would correlate the just loving God and then loving your neighbor as yourself. Um
mm,
so I there's this quote from Saint Augustine, and the quote is, love God and do as you please. This quote is suggesting that when you truly love God, um, you so when you truly love God, your will should be aligned with His will, um, say like in His desires. So, do you agree with the quote from Saint Augustine, "Love God and do as you please," or do you have any comment on that?
I would say I would say I agree, but it's kind of a tough one because like you can it's kind of like that saying, like, you say one thing but then do another, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So I mean you could say you love God, but then, oh, I'm gonna do this thing, even though I know there's gonna be um, a spiritual and sort of like a mental consequence, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it's kind of that thing where, you know, maybe, and maybe even you and I might do it every so often, but we might say, oh, I'll do this and God will forgive me. But then we're misunderstanding you know, the, we're misunderstanding the context of forgiveness, because forgiveness isn't like, well, you do this and God will forgive you. It's like, no, no, you try your best to avoid those things.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
I think I agree. I agree with it in part. But
yeah. It's
how
just
about yourself?
yeah, I was thinking about that quote in preparation for this, and it's it is I believe it is a true quote, but it is so hard. Like,
Hmm.
it's so hard to measure up to that quote, because
Yeah.
as our goal should be our what we want should and our desires should align with God's desires.
Hmm.
So I think it's a great quote, but it's a hard quote because
Hmm.
we struggle, we're imperfect and sinful.
Yeah.
So it's like it we are like, I think the goal is to get to there, but because we're sinful, our do as you please doesn't what we do as what pleases us doesn't always align there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because the do as you please nature in, well, pretty much most of us, is the inclination to do the things we know we shouldn't. And maybe even maybe some of those things aren't going to be truly harmful, but they're also not truly good. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's that sinful nature that sort of falls into the things that we know we shouldn't do, but we're like, hey, is it really so bad? You
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah. So okay, okay, so in the book of Matthew, particularly in chapter 5, um Jesus is giving one of his most, if not his most popular sermon, which is called the Sermon on the Mount. Um, and in this, I believe he's dissecting the Ten Commandments. For example, in chapter 5, verses 21 to 22, Jesus says that um, So you have heard it said you should not murder. But in that, Jesus says, is digging into the root of the problem, saying, even if you are angry in your heart, you are a murderer. And then in the same chapter 5, verses 27 and 28, he says something like, you have heard it said to not commit adultery. But what he is saying, even if you look at a woman um, with lust, you are committing adultery, or you're an adulterer. Um, so I think so. When thinking about the root of the roots of the Ten Commandments, so I think it sure like when I'm actually looking at the Ten Commandments, I don't think I don't I'm not it look they all look pretty simple. Just look, I don't think I'm putting enough. I say God's my God. I don't I'm not, but when you dissect them further, as Jesus did in the greatest in the Sermon on the Mount, it's we like we can't we can't do this, like we can't
No.
we it's against our will, or our
Mm,
nature. It sure like it sure so um what do you have to say about with the great because the Ten Commandments, we all know, we learned them in Sunday school,
mm,
but what do you think about how with go what Jesus did, taking the root of the Ten Commandments, and how, can you speak how we it's so easy to fail them, even though it looks like it's pretty is I don't think we've murdered anyone, right? Hopefully, I haven't actually cheated on my wife. I haven't actually maybe I've stolen a candy bar, or whatever. But it looks easier than just saying them. But as like Jesus said, even if you're angry with someone, so can you just kind of
mm.
dissect that for you?
I'd be the same as you, man. Like, it would be it's impossible to do any of this stuff with God. Without God,
Yeah.
because even when you're talking about like anger, usually if someone says something about you that isn't true, whether that's you're dumb, you're ugly, you're stupid, you could never be loved, never amount to anything. Our human response, our default setting is usually like, well, eye for an eye.
Yeah.
I'm going to say whatever I want about you, to other people. I'm going to, tear your character down simply because you said something that I didn't disagree with. And especially with the anger, where it talks about anger in verses, I think it's um 21 to 26, that's essentially going back to your original question. I think it's a, I guess the Ten Commandments, and from my perspective, it's sort of a warning, like how you can end up treating people and how you can end up treating yourself. And I guess the Ten Commandments, at least to me, it's like God's warning of what could occur, um, but also, sort of giving us a blueprint of, the steps that we could take to be a different person than, you know, people that either don't know God or don't have a relationship with Him. But I also don't think the Ten Commandments is a thing for us to be like, oh yeah, look at me, and putting ourselves on a pedestal. Because I mean, like I said, without God, all of this is just, impossible. But I guess what's another one that I could, and also like retaliation, like especially in Australia, because there's been times where people have like king hit someone in the back of the head, they fall on the ground, they passed away. Retaliation's a big one because it's like you don't actually have to retaliate, and most of the time you can actually just turn your back and just walk away. Like you don't have to retaliate. You
Yeah.
don't have to hurt someone just because they're hurting you. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm answering your question to the best
Oh,
of my
you're doing,
ability,
yeah, that's good.
but loving your enemies, man, because we talked about this at men's group recently, and like I think um say if like someone was treating you poorly and you find their wallet and there's like a fat load of cash in the wallet. Well, even if that person's your enemy, even if you don't get along with that person, you're not going to catch up with that person, have a decent conversation. It says to love your enemy, so that means that hopefully you would pick up that wallet and give it back to that person, and maybe through that act of like being a decent person, maybe a friendship forms or even just respect forms. You know what I mean? But like the alternative would be like, oh, I'll take the money out and then give the wallet back, or um, hey, they backed into my car, so I'm going to back into their car, that sort of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, man, the Ten Commandments are um, I guess a blueprint and a context for us to go back to and look at and just help us to be more like Jesus. I know that might be like the churchy answer, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. So okay, if um I believe when talking about commandments, like the Ten Commandments, um, I I think one of the, and I think this needs to be said when talking about the commandments, and I think one of the most challenging theological things that we wrestle, I think, as it's natural to wrestle with as Christians, balancing we are saved by grace, but um in Romans, um, I believe it is Romans, it says, faith without works is dead.
Mm,
Um, so how I think it's a really challenging thing to think about. Um, uh, we don't earn our salvation, right? We're completely
no.
saved by grace, and
Mm,
we died through Jesus' death and resurrection, and we're born again through Him. But also, we are supposed to keep the commandments, right? We are supposed to. So, can for my audience, can you say how you think about balancing grace and works? Because we know faith without works is dead, but we can't earn our salvation. I would just like to hear your input, how your thought processes about balancing grace and works. And I know it's not
that's a
easy.
um I think for me, and this was only probably uh maybe a year or so ago. I think the way that I balance it is, and whether it was the Holy Spirit or just whatever, but so I'm just going to say the Holy Spirit. Um, but I really felt like the Holy Spirit said, at least for me, remember your testimony because it helps you love people better. Because then you're less judgmental, you're less hypocritical when someone makes a mistake, especially someone that in the church. And maybe it's someone from another church that's in a really big position, and internationally, like a lot of people know, you know. But yeah, I think for me, it's just remembering your testimony, because um, it helps you to remember what God saved and set you free from. And when you also remember that, you remember that, you can come back to God. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present. And I think that's the trouble that some of us have. We think that we have to come to God whenever it's all figured out. We've got no blemishes, no visible sense of like mistakes or whatever. We don't smell of sin, and so we think that we have to come to God when we're perfect. But you know, God even says in His Word, "Come as you are," and with the works, I honestly have felt I've honestly felt a lot lately that social media has destroyed this, because if you're not getting like thousands of followers or thousands of likes or whatever on social media, a lot of people just assume that what they're doing is a big waste of time. You know what I mean?
Dude,
And
I
and, and
totally
it's and
agree.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, I don't care if you um I don't care if you only get like a few people liking or a few people commenting, and maybe it's the same people all the time. But
I
clear
feel like if you're not a social media influencer having thousands or getting paid, having enough followers to get paid from it, it's like
mm,
if you're not to have that check mark on your account that you're verified, it's like no one takes
yeah.
you seriously.
And even I remember, hopefully he doesn't mind sharing me this, but I remember doing a podcast with my friend Stacy, and at that particular time, um the the stage where his podcast was at was like, it's not getting much traction or whatever. But I think on that particular episode, we're talking about the body of Christ, and I don't know whether it's a correct interpretation, but we kind of came together and thought and said, sometimes, you might be the hand, sometimes you might literally feel like you're the armpit of the body of Christ, and the armpit stinks.
Yeah.
No one really wants to, walk around and smell someone's armpit, but maybe what you're doing feels like that. But there's significance in that.
I can feel that. I'm a cleaner for a living, so I clean toilets, and that you
mm,
can feel like the armpit or something else. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I think that's probably, yeah, that's probably my answer. But also, the last thing I would say, I think the trouble the trouble with us being believers and following God, and I think comparison also plays a big part in it as well. Because sometimes, at least in the conversations I've had, it's like, oh, I did this and I did that, and it's just like this vicious circle of like comparison. And it's just like, well, you're not supposed to compare yourself with someone else. You're supposed to be more like Jesus, not like, someone else. So you're not supposed to try to do what God's given someone else the ability to do, just because you feel like you want to get ahead and, be better than someone, because it's not even about that. But I think that's just a daily struggle in a way. But
Yeah.
yeah, man.
So and then I wanted to bring up with the Ten Commandments, with how straightforward it is, it and I think this was severely abused in Old Testament time and in Jesus's time with the Pharisees and Sadducees. They um they did everything in the law to a T to self glorify themselves, to see how
Mm,
righteous, the self righteous they are. And I think in the Christian community or in the church community, it's very easy to say, to point at these laws and the check mark, I did that, and look at over there and like, oh, look where I'm at, where they are. I
Mm,
think it's very important to remember um Jesus saying, uh, take the log out of your eye before the speck, and a speck out of someone else's, your neighbor's eye. And I believe faith, it's a personal relationship, just like you don't share every intimate detail with you and your wife on the internet. We should have a personal relationship with Jesus, right? Or in God.
mm,
And so there's in your is in your spiritual walk and how you're, it's a personal, you don't need to share everything, and you don't need to, if you someone else's walk, it, you don't need like compare, you don't, oh, that, look at, they have all these followers, they're doing so much work for God, while you're, maybe have a hundred uh followers on your podcast or whatever, or even less than that, or, and then, or over there, like, oh, how they're living like the devil, or, like, it's compares, and it's like, I just think it's very, we have a personal relationship with God, and like like I said, you don't share everything with your intimate conversations or anything with your wife. So do you have any comments on that?
so I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I get just want to touch on that. Like super religious, Pharisees thing. You know, I think they did get it wrong, like a lot of the time, because then you miss out on opportunities on loving the people that God, back then wanted a relationship with. Um, but yeah, I do agree with you. Obviously, um, every relationship with God's different, and so you're not going to share intimate things um, with your spouse. Especially if it's things that you've got to walk through with God. But in saying that, I think it's also important to you know talk about that stuff with your spouse, because then you kind of come together and then help. Iron sharpens iron, right? And those conversations are great because it strengthens your relationship and stuff like that.
Well,
But
and I guess maybe I just want to make sure I'm being understood. I'm not saying you shouldn't share things with your wife, right? I'm saying what you're, like, your conversations with your wife, you're not going to put all of that
oh
on
yeah,
Facebook
sorry.
or
Oh
something.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Like, you don't want to
Yeah,
share, because of course, like, me and Debbie and you and your wife, there's things that we talk about behind closed doors that
yeah.
we don't want to, the world, or so, like, I guess what I was trying to come at with there, like with you and God, you don't want to just broadcast it everywhere, right? It's
No,
a
for sure,
personal
man.
relationship. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think unfortunately a lot of people do that. And the consequence of like oversharing things that you spoke. I think. Sorry, man. My brain just finally
You're good.
realized the question. But no, I think there's a consequence, man, because if you share conversations that you and your spouse have on social media or whatever, and especially if it's conversations that you've spoken with your spouse about stuff that you've spoken with God about, the consequences, then you get like thousands of opinions, thousands of advice, and maybe like a whole bunch of that advice is from people that aren't in a relationship, that aren't married. So I've always said to my wife, like, if we get advice from someone that's not in a relationship, that's not married, unfortunately, I'm not being a jerk or anything, but I just don't care,
Yeah.
because um, the advice might be good, it might be like significant, and it might be great, but it's coming from a place of not being married. It's coming from a place of not being in a relationship. So like you can't really take it as something worth I guess listening to. But in saying all that, obviously if you're making a mistake and you've got your blinders on and you can't really see it, um, maybe it's advice that you should listen to. But I agree with you, man, because um, in the past, and not when I've been in a relationship, but I've put things on Facebook and it's been terrible because it's like, well, no one really needed to know that. That could have been a private conversation I had with God, and that could have been dealt with in a different way. But now you've got to face the consequence of all these opinions. And then because you've been thinking about it a lot, now you're thinking about it 10 times more.
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and I think
but
as even so, I think a temptation for married couples with in whether it be social media or within friend groups or whatever, a temptation for like even married couples is to show how cute every your perfect
mm,
moments, or like you having a all these baby pictures, or all these fun outings you do, and then so I think because or like how all these vacations you take or whatever, and like that's fun, but then it's like if I'm, me and Debbie, or me and my wife, we're not able to go on these vacations, or like we're our our alone, or our time where we can just breathe is on the couch watching TV, or like we
mm,
like it's not it's fun hearing about stuff, but it is like it's a very so like maybe think about if you're posting like all these extravagant vacations, and then or how bad your day was with your wife or your husband or whatever, like on both sides it's like there's overshare, like you can share too much good or you can share too much bad, is like
mm.
because everything it's like what you're wanting to be seen both ways, and it's like it just creates comparison.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's bad comparison too. Um, Especially with like the oversharing thing, because but I think it's just the social media thing, because we went from a time where there was no social media to a time where it's just everyone's on their phone. Like you see it all the time when you go out. Like you can't have a conversation with anyone anymore because everyone's on their phone. And so there's no significant deep relationships anymore because everyone's on their phone. You can't look someone in the eye because they're looking down at their phone. But I think when it comes to the oversharing thing, it's like, yeah, that probably could have been a conversation you had between, your partner or with a friend or someone else other than like the 50 people that you're probably never going to meet in real life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's just, yeah, that's just unfortunately where the world's gone, I guess.
yeah.
But,
Man, I just
and
want to say this is such a breath of fresh air. I miss talking to you. It's like I feel like these last interviews, I love interviewing, but I just feel like we're actually having a natural flowing conversation, and this is a breath of fresh air.
that's cool, man. But I also wanted to say, what was I going to say? Yeah, because um, with social media, man, you can feel so alone.
Yeah.
Like I know people that um, the only real interactions they have, the only real conversations they have, is with people online. And then it's like, well, but when you're going through and I struggle with this too because I'm an introvert, so I don't really talk about much stuff I go through. I just suck it up and go through it, then tell someone. But I think the problem is because no one really talks about things they're going through with anymore, and if they do, it's with someone that they can't actually sit with, hug it out, and have a conversation with. So I think social media has gotten to a point where um, the reason why a lot of people feel alone is because they're in their own little world, but it's on their phone, and it's not out there with other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know,
And I
but
want to be careful how I say this because I hate censorship, but it's something we're facing nowadays. But with the, I'll say, alphabet community, um, there is a community. So these people are struggling with identity, and there's um and so they're already like struggling. They can't feel like they can go to family or friends, but they can find a community online who they never met and have all this encouragement to, you should change all these life altering things, right? But they, do they really want the best for you? And like, if you decide maybe that's that community or parts of that isn't for me, then all you get is backlash. They only care about their like, there's agendas, and that's why it's so important to have real in-person
hmm,
community, because these false communities that are created online is dangerous.
yeah, because it leads to people being in like leadership positions where they haven't gone through. And I know this like might be uh straightforward non-educational answer, but like it leads to people being in leadership positions that haven't gone through formal training,
Yeah.
and then leading people into things that there's no like you can't you can't you can't come back from it. You know what I mean? Um, but you know, sorry, my thing just came out. But yeah, that's all I can say really.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to just thank you for, like I said, this is a breath of fresh air. I this is a beauty. So that there's also beauty in the internet, right? We're brothers and
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I hope and pray maybe we can see this each other on this side of heaven, but um, uh, we we wouldn't have be able to do this without the, and so there's so many things I am grateful for, but there
Mm,
is a danger, and I just I'm so thankful for our friendship through the years, and I just hope and pray for the best for you. And so can you, as we're kind of wrapping up, is there anything you would like to plug with your podcast or anything you're working on?
not really, man. I haven't done my podcast in so long. I'm hoping to get back into it, but I like to take breaks every now and again from the podcast, just so I'm not just you know um, repeating the same thoughts or talking about the exact same things. But no, not really, man. Not at this point in time. I
Okay.
mean, I wrote a poem yesterday, but I'm just trying to make sure it's at the stage where I'm happy to post it. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. And if you, I know you talk, if you do want to interview me for yours, feel free to let me know too. So
Oh
that,
yeah, for sure,
yeah,
man. Yeah.
I definitely would enjoy that. Um, so to my listeners, I just want to, so if you haven't listened to the it's still there. It's the Worth Living For podcast. I definitely recommend that. And then So, and if you would like to support what I'm doing with Broken Worship, feel make sure you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, my YouTube channel, or Spotify, and then if you would like to check out my books or merch, you can go to www.broken-worship.com, which will be in the description below. And right now, I'm wearing one of the three Halloween my sweaters. I have three Halloween sweaters available, which read, even on the nights I miss you most, I refuse to live my life chasing ghosts, which is from my newest book, My Faith Will Not Be Safe. Just kind of some cool Halloween merch. If you can get 20% off with promo code Broken Halloween, and as independent as me and Sean are small time doing this independently, kind of on the side, it really does mean a lot in the so and all that just supports keeping broken worship possible. And yeah, and then just keep supporting small town people with their where me and Sean both have a passion for Christ, and I believe God is using us, and I'm praying for both of our ministries. And so just thank you, Sean. Any last words?
No, man, I hope everyone has a good rest of the year and a good Christmas. I know
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
coming up pretty soon.
yeah. So thank you, and you just so here in the broken worship community, we remember even in our brokenness, we have a reason to worship. Thank you, and God bless.